Can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. How are you, sir?
I'm great. I don't want this to look like this, so I'm trying to figure out because we're not going to have seven people join, so this is a lot of wasted real estate.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. There's one.
Oh, I almost had it. I guess that's what we're going to have to live with.
Oh, it'll be all right. How's everything post-wedding for you?
It's going well.
Cool. Cool.
That went off without a hitch, and we will be going on our honeymoon in a couple of months.
Awesome. Awesome.
So,
We
yeah.
still need to do our honeymoon too. It's been it's actually funny. Michelle and I got married a while ago, but we were wanting to go through the process of me adopting both of her kids, and we wanted to keep that a secret until everything was done. So the formal wedding was actually the announcement to everybody, hey, by the way, the entire family is complete now. So our honeymoon is long overdue. But
Awesome.
anyway, well, I know you and I texted a little bit about this. I this is the topic of how we should be as providers. What are the character, the kind of the definition of what our professional presence is. I think is something that EMS is just kind of allowed to fall by the wayside. And I think that you and I have both had a variety of experiences, I'm sure, that have shaped how we look at this. But I kind of wanted us to have a conversation about this rather than just, you can preach and, tell people things all the time. But
hmm
an actual conversation is, I think, where we're actually going to start to see changes and getting people to talk and getting people to engage on a deeper level, not just bitching about the job.
Sure. Um, it's hard to know where to start on there
Hmm. Well,
because
go ahead.
I I think that the barrier for entry in EMS is incredibly low,
Yes.
too low. And I'm just going to be blunt in my observations today and not sugarcoat it. There are people out there who are legitimately faced with the dilemma: should I choose being a paramedic or should I choose being a sanitation worker? And that's absolutely the truth. And that person can probably skate his way through an EMT basic class, and then will just be put on the conveyor belt, the EMS conveyor belt, to the paramedic chair of an ambulance, because essentially EMS is looking for pulses,
Yep.
and that doesn't just lend itself to a terrible EMS paradigm. It lends itself to an EMS workforce that doesn't possess the literacy or the diplomacy to actually engage in the way that you want.
Yeah. What would you say? Because I agree with you that there are issues with our barriers to entry, both on the academic front, but also once you've gone through the academic hoops, the professional barriers to entry are largely not there. Um, so now, and there's a lot of those things that we can't necessarily control as of right now. What would you say, just from an internal cultural standpoint, how for everybody that's already in, we're all here, we're all trying to make this work. What do you see as the problems that we are going to have to cross over to actually start making that change internally before we can even look at doing it externally?
Well, EMS is inherently tied to our healthcare system, which is for profit. So EMS is always going to be about maximizing profit while minimizing effort.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and obviously it depends on which kind of system you work for, whether you work for a fire-based EMS system, which, some fire departments are very well funded, and so they may be more progressive in their practices, someone like a Seattle Fire.
Mhm.
Or they may simply be a volunteer fire district, in which case they may not be acting greater than an EMR level and essentially showing up in their personal vehicles and acting as assists to maybe like a county service. A county service may be a little bit more well-funded, and so they may get a little bit more aggressive or progressive. And then you have hospital-based systems, which I think tend to be the most progressive systems. But across the board, EMS is tied to the American healthcare system. So until there is paradigm change in the American healthcare system, you're not going to see too much movement in the EMS system.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, though, that culturally speaking, there are ways that we can start to shift? And I personally kind of take the approach of you can't make everybody happy, and not everybody wants to actually play ball to better the job. I'm sure we both worked with people over the years who truly don't care. They want to put in the minimum effort. They're not willing to do what they can, and they instead play this. I call it the noble victimhood card. They're like, "Woe is me! I get overworked, underpaid. I have a horrible existence." Okay, yes, there's problems with pay. There's problems administratively with all the different kinds of services. Like you mentioned, hospital-based services tend to have more funding and be better at bare minimum clinically. But having worked for several, there almost tends to be more of the focus on money and less on actually addressing the cultural problems. As long as everybody is generating revenue and not, getting the lawsuits, they're happy. I feel like, when you talk about other specialized groups, whether it's, something as commonplace as the Navy SEALs, everybody knows about that. Mm-hmm. When you say, I want to go be a Navy SEAL, well, we automatically can look at you and be like, hey, you don't have what it takes. Whether it's, your fitness, your personality, whatever. Those are the kinds of things I'm looking at as far as how do we change the quality of the culture internally within EMS. Is kind of more the direction I'm going, if that makes sense.
Well, I do understand what you're saying, but that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Right?
No, it doesn't.
So, it's like asking, how do I, in this outdated furnace system that I have in my house, mm-hmm. that was built for keeping it at 70 degrees when the outside temperature is 20 degrees. How do I keep it at 70 degrees when the outside temperature is now minus 40? Right? So our system is not built to do any of the things that you're talking about. So, mm-hmm. As far as the culture goes, what are you asking? As succinctly as possible, ask the question again.
Let me ask it a different way. When I don't know,
I'm not meaning to stonewall you at all.
No, you're good. Sometimes it makes sense in my head, and I need to be poked a little bit to clarify it. When you first got into EMS, did you feel that there was any kind of ethos or expectation of how you would behave and how you should carry yourself, and stuff that's largely self-policed, or not?
Well,
do you feel there was anything like that?
I was very fortunate to come up in a system that had an amazing ethos. They were a hospital-based system. It was a magnet hospital. They were incredibly progressive. They were incredibly proficient. They had an incredible ongoing education program. They also were very heavy on professionalism and representing yourself well. And they had a high, they didn't just hire anyone.
Yeah.
And so that set the bar for me forever.
Mm-hmm.
But then I went to work for a county service that was kind of a feast or famine system where in the summertime, it was a beach county in North Carolina. In the summertime, you could be incredibly busy.
Mm-hmm.
But in the wintertime, sometimes you could go all day without getting a call, maybe 2 days. And so, people slept for days and would complain if they got a call. And so I kind of saw both sides of the paradigm there. Also, I want to say hi to Jeff Murphy. I saw that he peeked his head in here. I didn't have any idea before I got into this what the expectations were. But what I will say is that prior to getting into EMS, I was an electrical contractor and an electrician. And I worked 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I worked my ass off crawling under houses, that were very, very cold and wet, and crawling around in attics that were like 130 degrees in the summer. And I worked my ass off. And so to get into EMS and see people complain about what they were complaining about, I had a hard time, and I still do have a hard time empathizing with some of that.
Yeah.
If that answers the question.
Yeah, because like you, when I came into this profession with a very, naive, starry-eyed look at, I get to help people and make a difference every day. And yes, that is true, but, kind of the Hollywood style of what EMS is, not what the real day-to-day life has turned out to be. And there's a part of me that kind of, I've seen even in the years that I've been in this, there's been a trend downward in the culture. It's gotten worse. It has not gotten any better. And as I started to kind of get a grip on my own life with things and, started dealing with different traumas and actually saying, hey, I can't control all this other stuff going on, but I can control how I behave and how I treat people. That has really pushed me to start asking the question of, well, what can we do, even with our limited resources, and what should our goal be? I feel like we have no vision outside of advancing medicine. I don't feel like we have a consistent vision where we should be, what the ethos should be. And I realize that not everybody's the same, and every agency has different needs, but I guess that's really the meat of what I want to ask and the conversation I want to have is what kind of ethos should we aim for EMS? And it's something that would take 10, 20 years to do. It's not a short thing.
Well, the one that is centered around first, one that actually supports valuing every life that's in front of you. Mm-hmm. I will always default to that as the foundation of EMS, that you should be valuing every single life that comes across you. You should train yourself to leave the judgments at the door, not because that there. And when I say that, listen, there are calls that we all get that we roll our eyes at, and we think that these people shouldn't be calling 911. I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Having said that, if you allow that to exist in the forefront of your mind, you get that call information over your MDT or however you get it, and you start rolling your eyes, that can affect you on calls where you can't afford to have that attitude. Something changes immediately. A patient you didn't expect to shit the bed shits the bed, and you weren't ready. You weren't paying attention because you thought it was BS.
Yeah.
Or you got a patient who, called 911 all the time, said he has chest pain so he could get a ride to the hospital and get a meal. And then that one time it's real chest pain. And that's when you stop caring and you didn't do the 12 lead,
Yeah.
So it starts with valuing every person that you have, recognizing that you may be the last rung on the ladder for that person and that you can actually impact their lives with that attitude. And then secondly, we have to start seeing ourselves as medical providers and not as toxic dude bros who are existing in this kind of quasi-militaristic police state type of like hall of first responder hall of fame.
Yeah.
And the perfect example of that are those absurd gray and black ambulances by, I think it was Harris or Harrison County, that are making the rounds on social media right now. That they look like SWAT vehicles. We have lost the plot on what the mission of EMS is when it comes to what we do. You know, we don't fight fires. We don't catch bad guys. We give epinephrine to people who are in anaphylaxis. We give Benadryl to people who have a rash. We defibrillate people who are in ventricular fibrillation. We provide fentanyl, or God, I need to avoid saying some words because they will take the live off. We have to remember we are there to provide analgesia to people who are experiencing pain. Those are the things that need to exist in the forefront of our mind. We need to stop thinking ourselves as heroes and as professional healthcare providers.
Yes. Well, and like you said, we all have the calls that we don't like, that we're not thrilled about, which is fine. Like I wouldn't even push back and say that that's a horrible reaction to have. However, and this seems to be getting worse, but it's always been there. That's what we present to the public, is the whining and bitching about all the calls that we don't want to run. How we haven't had lunch, how we didn't get to finish taking a dump, we didn't get to, but we still want to be treated like a hero. We still want the discounts. We still want all the recognition. So, in Jimmy's perfect world, what would you say is your ideal for even just a list of characteristics, or I would even make it more so like, what ideals are we striving for, even outside of, obviously always do what's in the best interest of the patient, but what ideals should be shaping how we behave as professionals? Call it a set of core values, if you will.
Well, I mean, you're essentially asking me to define a culture.
I mean, we can say that, yeah.
Well, I mean, we have reached a point in society where tribalism is at an all-time high, and there are certain aspects of our culture that have created associations and bonds which are very difficult to break, right?
Yeah.
There is, when you think about the first responder, that evokes a certain mythos or ethos within a certain culture. And you know what? I'm being too careful here.
Yeah, spit it out. Go for it.
Here's the thing. When you break down EMS in particular, I think that the people that see themselves more in the tactical, logistic, rescuer, hero mentality tend to be very conservative. The people who really see themselves as healthcare providers tend to be the polar opposite on the political spectrum. The problem is that we all work together and we're trying to suss out one philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very difficult to make progress in getting to move someone towards, even into the center. It's incredibly difficult because people are so entrenched in their philosophies. And I think that we need to just put that out there, that is very problematic right now.
Yeah. I think it seems to me, and I'd be curious if this is your experience too, when we're not talking about the nitty-gritty of medicine, the next discussion that comes up is the discussion of mental health. And I by no means consider myself an expert on that. I have my own thoughts and feelings about things, and actively believe in therapy. I think all of us should be in therapy in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just a couple times a year, go do a check-in. But I feel like we have a very toxic discussion about mental health as well, because we've conditioned ourselves to a victim mentality.
Yes.
And that translates into our attitude towards mental health is very much, well, we're kind of a special case. Most therapists can't actually address what we need, which I believe is patently false. Sure, there's some that are not qualified, but there's plenty that are. But the conversation pretty much tends to be, let me vent, let me bitch, let me complain. And then we largely, again, very generically, kind of leave it at that. We don't say, okay, well, we know all these things are wrong. Well, what can we actively be doing to make things better? And then the conversation jumps to, well, my employer doesn't do this. They don't do this. We don't get this support. Cool. That has nothing to do with you. You as a person should be accepting the responsibility for your own well-being and for how you behave.
Yeah.
And
being unwell is almost a badge of honor in EMS,
yes.
right? And
Yes.
that's something that we need to stop. I made a video a couple months ago called "It's Okay to Be Okay."
Yeah.
Kind of like get us to talk about a little bit like what I just said, looking at being unwell as a badge of honor, in that we do need to take some strides to be well, and we have people that actually vilify the ones that are actually trying to influence with a good attitude.
Yep.
And so there is a high wire that we have to balance on that exists between acknowledging the mental health issues, but then also encouraging us to get better and accept being better and accept that being better is the goal.
Yep. Because when somebody talks about getting better, we take it as an attack. Like, hey, bro, you need to work. You need to figure out your sleep. You need to stop guzzling ETOH. The smoking. Now personally, I don't mind an occasional cigar. That's just a choice I make. But I used to be somebody who would suck down as much nicotine as I could, and my man, I love it. But
unfortunately, I can't partake because I'm tested.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with a lot of those things individually. I love I've been an amateur connoisseur of certain kinds of adult beverages, but when that becomes our identity, when we just define ourselves as smoking, drinking, fucking, lack of sleep, all of it, then that's all that we're going to project outwards. And me personally, in a perfect world, and I say that perfectly because I think that we should define what the ideals are and then say, okay, well, downstream from that, what can we practically do to move us in a positive direction? We're never going to get to ideals. We'll never get to perfect. But I think that we should start with taking our own wellness seriously, both mental and physical.
Sure.
That, to me, is a foundation. If you don't have that, you don't have anything.
That's correct. And we also, there's certain light that we can't let in the window anymore. And there is this toxicity that exists, this toxic EMS humor that is almost a cottage industry at this point. If you really want to have a good run on social media, start creating toxic content, because you will get 100,000 followers immediately.
Yep.
And there was a time, and I know people say that, well, the dark humor is a coping mechanism, and I think that people who say that are just parrots.
Yeah.
They heard someone else say that, so now they're saying that. Now, do people in a situation where they're feeling tense and don't know what to do with themselves, does sometimes an off-color or inappropriate joke let a little bit of the air out of the balloon? Of course it does.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate all the time? No. And there was a time where that joke happened in a supply closet somewhere, or just out in the ambulance bay, and no one ever knew about it.
Yeah.
But now that joke is making someone money on Instagram or on TikTok or wherever your corner of the globe is. And so social media globe is. And so now we have this human centipede of toxicity that exists within, that threads itself within EMS and the internet. And we just have to start saying, you know what? We know that there is this mindset that it helps you cope with stress or deal with stress, but there are 1,000 things that help people deal with stress. It doesn't have to be a joke that makes us all look bad. You know, you look at the sleepy paramedic. Where is the sleepy paramedic? He is gone because he said the wrong thing at the wrong time. And and he's my friend. All I'm doing is just saying something that happened. Half of the people that followed him felt like it was fine. It was just a joke. Half of the people, were pretty strongly condemning what he said. And we all just have to be unified now that we just can't go there anymore, because it does contribute to the negative ethos of EMS.
Well, and you made a good point that not all coping mechanisms are created equal. You have good ones and you have bad ones. And I think that we use the term coping mechanism as a justification for the things that we know are actually wrong, and or maybe not even wrong, just not healthy for the purpose we're advertising. Going to the gym is a coping mechanism. Go out in your street and just do a dead sprint, see how long you can last.
Yeah, I'm engaging in a coping mechanism right now.
Exactly. You can have, we got a 3D printer now in the house, so we're making all kinds of like fidget spinners and little things for the kids, like just little knickknacks even. Like there's so many ways that you can actively, positively take control of the coping process, whether it's trauma from the job or trauma from outside of life. I would argue that most of us that get in this job are traumatized in some way, shape, or form, and that's largely what hangs on more so than what we see every day on the truck. That's not universal. Some of us are different.
Yeah, I do think that the field attracts people who have been exposed to trauma. I certainly have. I've been rolling around with that concept for a while now too. Somebody else brought that up to me, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit more, but I'm still it's still cooking.
Yeah. Well, and all of this, and we can go around on a number of different ideas. Michelle and I have largely codified our perspective on it, not as a, hey, this is the be all end all, but it's, hey, there's certain core values that we should be pushing towards. At the very least, it gets us moving somewhere. If we're engaging in these conversations, but not just here, the conversations in the ambulance bay are what matter. And so, obviously, like we just talked about, taking initiative with your personal well-being, taking the initiative to be a leader. Like, people think that because they're not a white shirt or whatever, uniform color you use, that they don't have responsibilities as a leader. And I think that's patently bullshit. Because when I was an EMT, was in a lot of situations where I had to lead because my medic wasn't. And no, I wasn't telling him how to do his job, but it was more of I had to take initiative, take steps to make his job easier to be able to do things. And I see everyone having the opportunity to be a leader in the culture first and foremost.
Yeah. Well, to start with, white shirts are not leaders.
Correct. Managers.
They're not leaders. They are managers.
Yeah.
Leaders have no specific title, and they don't wear any specific uniform. They just are leaders. And you look all over the place, and on social media and at conferences and wherever it is that you are able to observe some of the more recognizable people in EMS, and you recognize who the leaders are.
Mm-hmm.
People recognize that a Tyler Christofouli is a leader, right? People recognize that Nurse Gwenny is a leader. People recognize that Greg Carr, Shade Tree Cardiology, is a leader. These are people who are leading with their hearts and their minds and with their intellect as well. But even then, you have to suss out who the good leaders are and who the bad leaders are, because there are leaders and then there are leaders.
Yeah.
So even then, there's people who might be leading you in the wrong direction. But we do need to establish that leaders, that managers, supervisors are not necessarily leaders.
Agreed. I think we're very illiterate as a society as a professional society when it comes to the topic of leadership. We have an idea because, I had this one supervisor one time who was awesome. So like, that's the definition of, what a good leader should be. Well, maybe not. You have to look at a broader picture and see that there's different styles, and different styles work for different people at different times. But at a baseline, we should all be trying to achieve more literacy on that topic because it affects all of us. You can't just ignore it. It's incredibly important, and I think we have ignored it too much. And now the people that shouldn't be in positions of authority are there because nobody knew to stop them. Nobody tried.
Yeah. I want to address this comment from Nightmare Medic. It says, leaders lead from the front and go through the trenches with their people, not ride a desk. And that's kind of contrary to what I'm saying. The inclusion criteria for leadership is not wearing a white shirt or having a title. But there is also not exclusion criteria to where a leader cannot effectively lead from a desk. It depends on what they're doing. It depends on what the responsibilities are. But there are plenty of people in an administration who are the best of us. Mm-hmm. They are there for the right reasons. They are acting in good faith, and you see the fruits of their labor every day. Right now, I can think of somebody that works in a desk in our department, and the thread of what she does for our department is visible in everything. The amount of things that she gets done for our department and the way that she keeps our department organized and the amount of resources that she is able not only to make available to us, but to make us aware that they are available to us. Mm-hmm. Everything that she does indicates that she is leading from a desk. Yeah. And so I think that we have to be fair that leadership happens everywhere by everyone, and we just recognize who those people are.
So how would you, and it's a fairly broad question, but on both an academic level and operational level, what do you see are the ways that we can start to shift this conversation? And with the assumption that obviously the infrastructure of healthcare is an uphill battle that we may fight indefinitely. But how would you ideally want to start moving towards implementing higher quality character and ethics into this profession?
Well, you have to identify what our paradigm currently is.
Agreed.
Okay, so we work in a paradigm where the short answer is that we are the social safety net of the U.S. To expand on that, there are three immediate types of healthcare that a person, I don't want to say immediate, there are three frontline types of healthcare that a person can get in the U.S. And that is your general healthcare that's available through your personal physician. There is urgent care, and then there's emergency care. Those are the three frontline healthcare paradigms. Mm-hmm. And people are going to pursue the path of least resistance when they need something, when their healthcare, when their state of health is out of whack. And generally speaking, the path of least resistance is going to be emergency healthcare. So they will go to the emergency room either on their own or through EMS. So EMS primarily, their primary job right now is not to be an emergency healthcare provider. It is to be a healthcare provider who provides healthcare screenings to people who have some sort of disruption to their general state of health. That is our current healthcare paradigm. And when I say things like that, people get all bent out of shape. But what they don't realize is that what they are saying is not what is our current paradigm. What I'm telling you is indisputable. There is no arguing with it. That is what we are. And it has nothing to do with what we should be. It's just what we are. So the question you're asking now is what is our goal and our responsibilities, and what do we want to be within that paradigm? Is that fair?
Yeah, with the emphasis on, using what we do have available to us to improve, culturally and whatnot, and also maybe ways to discourage people from coming in that shouldn't, as best we can.
I am not confused about what he meant by leading from the front, because what he said is that leaders lead from the front. Leaders lead from all over the place. They don't necessarily ever have frontline experience. That is a very limiting attitude. Now, he said that he admires leaders from the front, then that's fine. But leaders, I am not confused at all. Anyway, didn't mean to get off track. And I know that you kind of want to do the whole question thing later.
That's fine.
So get me back on track.
No, you're good. So we're looking at, given we've identified largely the things that we can't control, at least not right now. We can't control the healthcare infrastructure. We can't start from scratch, basically. We have to move with it. So how do we adapt and implement, we'll say a predetermined set of core values. We could quibble over the number and exactly which one, but how do we go about infusing that into the culture, both academically and also operationally? So academically is probably where we start, because that is almost everyone's first exposure to what we do, as far as their first career exposure anyway, is going to be in the classroom. And everything that they do throughout there reinforces performing rapid triage, making rapid decisions, identifying life threats, prioritizing your own safety, and then rapid transport to a hospital because time is muscle, or time is brain, or whatever. Those are all very important things, but it is training that addresses very little of what we do. The number one reason people call EMS is for abdominal pain. And the number one diagnosis they get from that abdominal pain is no diagnosis at all. They leave with a set of papers that say you have been diagnosed with abdominal pain. If this continues to happen, take this Nexium that you've been described, or something like that, right? The next reasons why people call 911 is for respiratory or breathing problems, which is very, very generic. Yeah. And what gets tossed in those breathing problems is the people that call because they have a turned ankle. They're asked by a dispatcher, "Are you having any difficulty breathing?" They're like, "Yeah, my breathing's pretty tight." And now that's a breathing problem call. And then they call for chest pain. And most of the diagnoses that people get for the breathing problems and the chest pain are just nebulous diagnoses that are not asthma, COPD, CHF, ACS, PE, or what have you. And so I think that we need to flip EMS education upside down with some foundational assessment skills, rather than emphasizing those split-second emergency decisions that you, in reality, will hardly ever use.
In saying that, I'm not saying that we don't reinforce those skills, but we have to build towards them.
Gotcha. Now, with the, I guess you could say, intangibles, and I acknowledge that intangibles are just that. There's not always a metric for how to enforce it. What level of responsibility would you place on an academic program to have the literacy training, if you will, on mental health, on your physical wellness, taking care of yourself, so that you can take care of other people more effectively?
One more time.
So, like, the way I see it is, if I'm taking care of myself as an individual, I am going to be able to better care for other people. I'm going to be mentally sharper. I'm going to be focused more. I'm not going to be short of breath, dealing with shit hitting the fan on a critical call. I can handle myself, but also mentally. So the question is, how do we, with those more intangible conversations, I can't have a checkoff for mental health, your physical wellness, whatnot. Should we have, more of an emphasis on those things on an academic level? Should we have some, in the same way that like Fire Academy has physical fitness testing, should we move towards doing that as well for EMS?
Absolutely.
It's a hard stop, if you will.
And, the classrooms will say we don't have time for all of that. But you do. You can jettison all of your operations bullshit.
Yeah.
And NRMT can stop testing you on operations, because it is a colossal fucking waste of time.
Amen.
The number one reason people fail the registry is for operations. And this is going to be on logistics that are going to have absolutely no bearing on what you do for your specific service.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that the dimensions during the day for an LZ are 75 feet by 75 feet. At night, it's bigger. But it may be different for your locality. Like us, we prefer to have 100 by 100 feet during the day and 150 feet by 150 feet at night. Who cares if you don't know what the megahertz are of the radio you're speaking on? I don't need to waste a student's time talking about how, when I talk to you over the radio, that I am using, like, I'm sending communication and you are receiving communication. What sort of Sesame Street nonsense is that? So you can jettison operations immediately, and we can start fitting in there skills that are more necessary for EMS, including taking care of themselves. And the thing that I think should have a required amount of hours every cycle, which is conflict resolution.
Yes. With, I agree with you 100%. I think that we need to restructure the academic side of this, because as our field is expanding, as you've pointed out, our original purpose, our original function is largely not what we're doing now. So I agree that dispensing with some of the just empty bullshit that you're going to get in orientation at your first job, we should be having more of an educated discussion on, how to be a leader in your day-to-day life on the job, how to proactively manage your mental health and physical well-being, preaching and teaching proper accountability and emotional regulation when you're having to make decisions in a shit hit the fan situation. All of that is stuff that is ignored completely on an academic level. With now transitioning to, okay, we have everybody who's out here in the field now. We've all gone through school. We've got all the things. We're out running calls. What would you, if time, money, resources, whatever was no object, how would you go about trying to influence and shift cultures in day-to-day life? What kinds of incentives do we talk about? Like, what kind of, accountability can we implement out there in the field? Because that's ultimately where we need it. I know it's a big question, so don't. We could probably talk an hour just on that.
the problem is that what you're doing in that situation is we're asking ourselves, how do we incentivize empathy and good behavior?
Mm-hmm.
There are people that just don't possess it.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I'm currently watching that play out right in front of me in this live.
Mm-hmm.
What we do, and I don't mean that in bad faith. I'm not trying to insult anyone. I'm just the job itself can rid you of empathy.
Yep.
But the job requires it, and your coworkers require it too. If you work in this field long enough, and not only do you lose empathy, but you start becoming toxic. It's like you're a radioactive seed. You know how Vladimir Putin assassinates people as they leave a radioactive seed in their hotel room and then they die of radiation poisoning. The people who have lost empathy are now radioactive seeds in our field. Mm-hmm. That's causing radiation poisoning to everyone around them. So I don't know how you incentivize getting empathy back. And I don't know if disciplining people for not having it is effective.
I guess, and I'm a firm believer in you can lead a horse to water, but you can't let them drink. I can't convince somebody ultimately to want to be a better person. I mean, we can't escape that. I do think that we should have some level of, I mean, again, the first thing is defining what the expectations are. But once we get a grip on at least generally what those are, I think that there's a difference between people who are struggling and people that don't care. And I think that there should be some kind of weeding out of the people that don't care. And as well as the good old boy system, but that's a whole separate soapbox. I don't want to be all inclusive. We shouldn't be, because we don't promote excellence when we're all inclusive in the situation. We want people to be elite, not cocky, arrogant assholes, but we want people to be excellent and to care about the job and to care about the people. And however we end up accomplishing it, I think there should be some pressure applied on those people.
Yes.
Say, hey, if you will, call it professional bullying. Like it should be stigmatized to not care about your job, and that we internally should be policing that and saying, hey, no one cares. Shut the fuck up. Like, go run your calls, take care of your patients, and handle your own shit. And if you're not going to, go get some help, because we can't have that. We can't tolerate that anymore in this profession.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that half of the people that are in our profession are relatively new to the profession. And that's at any point in time that you look at the profession.
Yep.
And so we're placing an expectation on people that just haven't built up the confidence to fight back. And I know that I'm being contrary to everything you're saying. I'm not meaning to. No. It's just a way, and that's kind of just my approach into thinking through things, is to just dissect it. The average person in EMS has maybe you point a finger at anyone, they have 2 to 3 years of experience in EMS.
Yeah.
And some of them are already too far gone, and then the others just don't have the confidence to kind of fight back. However, you're right. The solution is to fight back. It's okay to punch a Nazi, and it's okay to be completely intolerant of people who are making the field insufferable.
Yeah.
So as far as what you do, I know for myself, I do have the confidence. When people complain to me about patients, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I just don't want to hear it. And I won't virtue signal to them. I don't want people to think that I just have rainbows shooting out of my ass. I just am disciplined, right?
Yeah.
So when somebody starts, can you believe this guy called 911 for this? Yes, I can believe it. I've been in EMS for 20 years. Do you think that I haven't seen this to the power of 10 more than you have, I've just made a decision to not let it bother me anymore.
Yep.
Because I need that for my sanity. And my coworkers need that for their sanity. And so I need you to stop hemorrhaging this. And you need to make a decision before you clock in what sort of paramedic you want to be.
Yeah. And I think to address specifically what you were pointing out as far as the youth of the industry, which, I'm I'm only 34, but I feel like I'm in at least the upper half as far as the age demographic. Most of these kids coming in are younger than my youngest siblings, but it's they are receiving the curse that has been passed down and not addressed. They're receiving the people that they walk in. I mean, there's a lot of them now that are walking in that don't care from the get-go. They're like, oh, free education. I can get my EMT for free and get a decent job. Cool. They don't actually care about the gravitas of this job. But even the ones that do care, they come in and they're being beat down so hard. I cannot tell you how many times I have showed up on calls and the EMTs are like, oh, thank God it's you. Because they're not allowed to think freely. They're not encouraged to think freely. There's no even intangible incentive. They're just collectively shit on. And so, no, I don't blame them for not wanting to stay. That's why the age gap is so bad. Nobody wants to stick around anymore.
Sure. This EMT life has kind of asked a very poignant question in regards to that, which is, are you saying that the newbies are living with a curse us vets created? I don't know if I would be that extreme about it, because, the conditions contribute a lot to our attitudes, right? I mean, for the last 2 years, have worked as a pediatric and neonatal critical care paramedic. My day is very manageable, even though my patients are incredibly sick. But before that, I had 19 years in 911. And obviously COVID changed things for everyone. And I was getting eaten up and spat out every single day by the machine. There was a call waiting for me before I clocked in, and then I would get off late. And it doesn't matter how many people with negative attitudes are around me. That is going to exhaust you, know?
Agreed.
And I realized how burned out I was by that. And the way that I exhibited that is I worked with someone who I didn't want to work with. I even warned my company not to pair us up because we wouldn't be a good match. And then they did anyway, and we were working under these conditions, and I treated that person like absolute garbage. Despite the fact that I was making videos on a daily basis talking about how saving lives begins with kindness, and talking about how we should be treating other people. The conditions will destroy you, but also your partners will destroy you if they're toxic.
Yeah.
So EMT, you're kind of right and wrong. I mean, I don't think you were making a point. You were asking a question, but so the answer is yes and no. I mean, we definitely have a problem with eating our young, and I don't think anyone would argue with that.
No. And I personally think that specifically, the eating our young, is something that we need to voraciously attack, because I think that's where it's really starting for a lot of these new people, is they're getting chewed up and spit out from the word go. And it's incredible that people like us, who are supposed to be compassionate, are some of the most vitriolic, negative, just unconscionably rude people. And obviously that's a generalization. There's plenty of people who are amazing in this. I have gone through phases where I have not been a peach to work with. And I've had to get a beat down sometimes, and had to learn the hard way that, hey, you know what, you can't get away with this. But it's getting so bad. At the end of the day, yeah, I push forward a plan for how I think we can do stuff, and how we can effect some change. But if nobody walks away from this with anything else other than you got to look at yourself and how you're treating people around you and start with that, I'll be happy as a clam, because we're so good at blame shifting, we don't look internally enough. We really don't.
Sure, and I also think that just acknowledging, me, the problem is me. Acknowledging that you're part of, well, I don't want to say part of the problem, acknowledge that you have as much potential to contribute to the problem as anyone else is part of the solution.
And like you said, leaders, being a leader is not a job title.
EMT life, those two things are not mutually exclusive. Go ahead.
No, you're good. It's what have you and I seen over the years? The people that were the most impactful leaders in a workplace culture were just regular Joes out running calls. My take is, if everybody who truly cares about the job, who truly cares about being exceptional and treating people with respect and taking responsibility for their own life, if all of those people started putting that effort into being a leader where they are, I think that's where we would see over time a huge shift, because you can't control ideas. You can't stop people from taking responsibility for their life and for what's around them. I really believe that's where the core of all of this is we have to start making the decision to go above and beyond now. If you're grumpy going onto a call, all right, show some emotional regulation. Take a deep breath. Have a script if that's what you need to. Have a script to just get through that irritation. You don't like new people and students. Oh, well, you're going to have to get over that, because you're a role model for, X number of people around you, and you're actively influencing them with your energy. So being a leader is controlling, how do I project out to other people?
Yeah.
So I guess the final question I have with this, and we can, I guess, open up to everybody after that, is, what happens if we don't change this? What happens if we don't continue the status quo? If we don't change, if we don't collectively change the culture of the job, address our ethos problems?
That's a good question. I mean, we're seeing that play out in real time socially right now. Mm-hmm. We are very, very polarized, and we're starting to get very polarized in EMS. I mean, I've kind of been tracking a little bit of the comments here, and you can see, and this is just a generalization, you can see that we are polarized here.
Yep.
So, what happens is chaos. These are the things that happen in countries that are a precursor to civil war, mm-hmm. which is the breakdown in communication, because the spectrum is now way too wide. I actually even posted a quote the other day from a philosopher who said one of the biggest problems we have today is that you either agree entirely with someone or you disagree entirely with someone. And you're simply incapable of the subtleties of picking apart where there are strengths and weaknesses to how people operate. But I think that EMS is headed for chaos. I really do. Because EMS is entirely dependent on the structure of society to exist. So I think that if we don't, from the inside, start to demanding change from the people that we work with, our peers, and even from our leaders, that I don't even have a good answer for that. What I do know is that we are in a unique time where there are people that have platforms, and like myself, I have a modest platform. There are people who have much larger platforms than you or I do that can really destabilize the system because they can talk directly to people, and we've never really had that before in EMS,
Mm-hmm.
The walls in between the boots on the ground and the people behind the desks aren't really there anymore because we have the ability to call them out.
Yeah.
And almost without consequence.
Yeah.
As long as you're not being, as long as if you're acting in good faith, it's probably not going to be with much of a consequence anyway. So I think that's one thing, is people using their platforms as a new foundation of positivity and a way to push back and call out bad behavior. But as far as what happens if we don't, I think it's just absolute chaos.
And it sucks because it's not like we're the business that can just shut down if it stops doing well. We will always stay open, but with this much internal instability, it's going to turn into just more of a cesspool than a lot of it has already become.
What's your answer to that question?
I mean, I think it's very much, pardon my neighbors, they're enjoying their Second Amendment rights. I think I don't think that EMS would ever shut down, but I think that EMS, if it doesn't fix these issues, I guess you could say more intangible issues, it's not a clinical problem, even though we're horribly disunified on that as well. But I think that you will eventually start to see so much constriction on EMS because if we're lowering the expectations, we're not creating a culture where people are actually taking the job seriously. There's more patients that are going to unalive. There's more careers that are going to be negatively affected. There's going to be more stuff in the news of people messing up, and which is going to destroy public confidence, which is going to fry any chance we have on a government level to fix these things. So we'll just internally implode, but we can't actually, disappear. So we just drag it out, and it makes it worse for everybody if we don't fix it.
Yeah. Something I was thinking about earlier too is that, we kind of had a little bit of back and forth, and we kind of defined what some of the things were that we would talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not even in consideration of how healthcare is being impacted right now. We're acting as if healthcare is not literally imploding. Case in point, I used to be a very, very strong advocate for getting EMS out from under the Department of Transportation, because it's absurd that it's there at this point. I mean, it just has nothing. I mean, we drive ambulances, yes, but it's absurd that that's where we exist as a paradigm. And I would say at the time that we need to be under Health and Human Services. Now, I am so fucking grateful that we are not under Health and Human Services, because there is a crazy person in charge of Health and Human Services, and healthcare is being dismantled in no particular type of order and for no particular type of reason. And that just adds more chaos to what's happening right now. I'm actually grateful we're under the DOT right now, but as far as EMS descending into chaos, now start taking away the studies that guide us, right? Like right now, we're waiting for, there's a huge study going on right now, which is going to give us more answers about epinephrine after the Paramedic 2 trial. We're not going to get another study on epinephrine for a while.
Yeah.
We're not going to get studies on the things that are important to us now for a long time. Imagine if we're engaging in practices right now that are not beneficial, and now we don't have the research available to us to confirm whether it is beneficial or not. We are already in chaos right now, and now add to our internalized issues. My God, man.
It's a lot. Like I have no problem running my mouth, and I try to, if I address something heavily, I do my best to have a good rationale and reason behind it. I spend a lot of time reading. I've been a student now for years of a variety of leaders from different industries, not just EMS and healthcare. It is scary the direction that we're heading in if we don't get some more literacy on these things and push each other around a little bit more. It's not gonna get any better if we don't collectively, as a majority, actually start taking action instead of just bitching about it on TikTok or making Facebook posts about it. We actually have to step up and do something about it.
Yeah. As far as what the next step is, here's the fail point in all of this every single time. What's the next step?
Yep. I mean, personally, my personal answer, I think changing the tone of how we talk about it to begin with is something we all just have to take the responsibility to do. We have to address the narrative from day one. As far as what we do beyond that, I mean, obviously we need to have a more organized legal representation. I don't feel that our government advocacy is doing a ton of good right now. I feel like, yes, in general, there's good things happening, but we're still so fucked across the board. We need something from the people on the ground to actually start seeing some change. Something that Michelle and I are wanting to do more of, and of course, right now, we're spread thinner than butter on warm toast, but we want to start putting together actual leadership training, not just talking about it, not just, a couple good ideas on some videos, but actually say, hey, here's an approach to addressing leadership specifically within EMS. I've heard of some, leadership courses, and I know people that have gone and taken them, and I see zero change in their behavior. And I'm like, you either didn't learn anything from it, or what you were taught is not useful because it's not translating out to the field. And so, I mean, obviously, I can only impact so many people at one time with that. But, and I would love for other people to come and, outdo me on stuff. Like, this is not even necessarily a business plan. I have other stuff going on for that. I truly just want us to start pushing people to start problem solving. We're great problem solvers. We're wonderful problem solvers. We just need to apply it to this.
Sure. On the micro, on the macro, we haven't really proven to be effective problem solvers.
No.
Ashlynn, do you want to join? Or will you join?
That was pretty much all I had topic-wise, so I'm good. Whatever we want to do as far as engaging with the folks, I'm here for it.
How do I do this?
She should just be able to. Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Hey, RedBeard, do you want to join? I'm just
How are you
gonna.
guys?
Good. How are you?
I have never met you, never seen you. Instant follow. You had such good things to say. Like, I was sitting here just like, yes, thank you.
Goodness. What's up, man?
All right.
How's it going?
I think one of the things you said really hit me hard, and it was the leaders that were riding behind the desk. I'm in a leadership class right now, and one of the things that stuck out to me was when I thought about my leaders, they don't announce their leaders. Like, you look at my shift, and we have 3 parts of command staff, but you would never know their command staff. They're so integrated in their coworkers and their work, and they show up. They do their job every day. They don't complaining about the middle school stuff every single day. Instead, they do their job to help students. The students and the new hires who have come through my service, they look at them and they're like, wow, these people are great. And I'm like, yeah, those are the people that should be in a leadership position. You would never know they're leaders, though, because they don't announce it. They don't have it embroidered on their shirts. They don't use their voices for the bitchiness. They use it for the leadership that they actually can change. They try to make positions for the better.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to yell to everyone that you're in charge, then you're not in charge.
Exactly.
The lion doesn't have to say that it's the lion. Everybody knows.
That's right, yes.
You don't need your polo and your pullover and the side of your hat embroidered in every single leadership position.
Unfortunately, I don't have that luxury. Because I stick out like a sore thumb. Because, so like the way our leadership shirts work, where I'm at, is like, so if you're in the office, you have this black and charcoal looking polo. If you are the crew chief, the shift lead, you have a red polo that makes you look like a Casey's worker. So I stick out like a Casey's worker. Everybody else has blue.
We had white shirts at our 911 service, but I mean, they were almost invisible to me. I almost never saw them, which I think that, you know, if you're doing your job in EMS anyway and doing it well, you probably shouldn't be seeing your supervisor very often. But.
That's true too.
There's a difference though between the ones that actually go out and just help versus the ones who try to come in and just commandeer the call from you.
Yeah.
Like, if I ask you for help, cool, like I'll help. But if you just want to show up and be an extra set of hands, cool. Like, there was one service I worked for, and I won't say the name just because I don't like talking about it publicly, but one of the services that I worked for, the director was very high up in the hospital. It was a hospital-based base. And he would get chewed out by the hospital administration for how much he would get out and run home. Like, he just loved on the ground level what we do so much. And not in a commandeering way, but he would just show up, hey, how can I help you? What can I do? And incredibly intelligent, one of the smartest medics I've ever met, but actually is someone in authority over a large system that cares about making it better and taking care of people. Mm-hmm. Increasingly rare these days.
You know, on the subject of leadership, one thing that is a problem in EMS is that we don't have much upward mobility.
Yeah.
And so you will serve your time and rate, and if you stick around long enough, you're going to be a supervisor. And you may not be qualified to be a supervisor, but it's your only option. For many, many people, their only option to do better for themselves is to become a supervisor. In some cases, they're not doing better for themselves because now they're getting a salary, but they're exploited for more hours. So they're not necessarily doing better. And so EMS, we're starting to diversify a little bit. Like I'm a rarity, which is a neonatal and pediatric critical care paramedic, but we're starting to see more of the diversification of EMS where you can specialize in those areas. That's one thing I think that helps with not pushing people who are not leadership candidates into leadership positions, is giving them another option.
Mm-hmm.
I have a captain at my work. He says the only reason he took the captain position is to make sure other people would not be in it. Not that he necessarily wanted to be a captain, and he's a phenomenal captain. But if he had the choice to do it again, he wouldn't do it. But he wanted to block that position from other certain people that would use that position for the worse rather than the better.
I think that's something we don't talk about enough right there. Like, I'm more interested in your commitment to excellence in the job than I am in how long you've been a paramedic. Mm-hmm. Because there's 30-year paramedics who have repeated their first year 30 times. And then there's 3-year paramedics that they know their shit, they're excellent providers, they have all the knowledge, and they're actually committed to the job at hand and taking care of the people, not collecting a check without having to do it.
One of my supervisors isn't even a paramedic. He's an EMT, but he does the job phenomenally. He doesn't try to overstep people when he knows it's not his place. But then there are paramedics that are supervisors at my service where I'm like, you are stepping into shoes that you are not ready for at all. And you've been in this service for decades. We hired a supervisor last year or 2 years ago that he had not been an EMT very long. He was in medic school, but his character alone is what got him in that leadership position. He knew how to lead people in a positive way, and his demeanor allowed people to gravitate towards him. And that is something that I don't see in EMS very often.
Something else that we didn't talk about was actually the power of mentorship in changing our paradigm. I feel very strongly about mentorship, and I actually I'm still doing it, working on building a mentorship program, a national EMS mentorship program where you can, let's say you're an EMT in California, new EMT in California, and you want a mentor, you want someone to help guide you through this, to be a positive influence, to be a resource. You contact the National EMS Mentor Program. We get you paired up with someone who is as close to you as we can get. That was starting to build up a head of steam, and I was going to work with, I won't mention the educational company's name, but I am now not intending on ever working with that educational company again, and so I'm kind of at square one. Ashlynn knows exactly what I'm talking about. But,
stir that pot. Stir that pot.
But I still intend for that to be a thing, and I think that mentorship is a huge tool in getting people stewarded through this process and avoiding some of the toxicity, avoiding some of the pitfalls, and getting to be leaders.
Well, and I think that that's something that we throw the word mentor around like just, I mean, mentors. There is a difference between being a preceptor and being a mentor.
Yes.
Like you precept people, and yes, of course, you want them to succeed. But when, and there are people that claim to be mentors that probably shouldn't be mentoring a cat, much less an EMT or a paramedic. Like, let's just be honest. But to me, mentorship has always been, trying to take somebody under my wing and show them like the right way to, continue on in this profession, right? Understanding at its core that you're going to be learning a lot for a lifetime. This is not just something that you can come in if you plan on making this your career and you can just, learn the bare minimum and skate by. And I think that we've been doing that for too long. And I think that I really like the mentorship idea. So if you ever get that going, I want in. Just saying.
It's gonna take a lot of organization because first and foremost, there needs to be a stated set of values that everyone needs to abide by. And then there needs to be mentor training for everyone, something that actually has some sort of certification or something that says that I've been vetted, background checks, all that sort of stuff. It's going to be a while, but it's a passion project of mine. So.
I think another problem with preceptors is I see this way too often at services around me. Preceptors are voluntold that they're going to have a student, whether they want that student or not. And that is something where there's a job that I'm trying to seek out right now where I would be directly in charge of matching students with preceptors. And that is not talked about enough. I was very fortunate. I had amazing preceptors. I literally got thrown into these people's hands and they took me on graciously. I have seen way too many students ruined by preceptors because those preceptors didn't really want the student. It wasn't necessarily a personal thing to the student. They didn't want to take that responsibility on. They didn't have that passion or drive to share the knowledge or allow the student to have the full experience. Having a student was one of the greatest joys of my life. It was still one of the best summers that I had. And I don't think there's that many people that have that passion really anymore because they've been so burnt by student after student after student after student, that they're just like, I'm done, I don't want to do it. But those are the people that consistently get thrown students, and we're not seeing that problem.
My daughter just completed paramedic school in Florida, and when she was doing her clinicals with the local fire department there, she said she just had absolute miserable experience. You know, that it was almost like she was a parasite on the ambulance. And I mean, that is, I think, a typical story for a lot of people who do that. And you're absolutely right. The amount of damage a preceptor can do. And you know what? I don't even blame those preceptors. They're not suitable for that sort of work, and it should be recognized that they're not suitable for that work. And so they should never, ever, ever get a student or a third rider.
Yes, absolutely. And that's another problem, especially at my service. They take on a number of students without having the amount of adequate preceptors. But they keep putting them with these preceptors because of years of experience, and that's not an adequate quality in a preceptor whatsoever. Like, I can think of two right now. They have had students upon students upon students, and then they come back, and no matter how many negative reviews we keep getting from these students, they continue to be put with them. Stop. What is the point? It's like you're showing the student what not to do.
Absolutely. I always try to caution students to avoid the toxic people, avoid the complainers, avoid getting near them. Don't let them get any of that on you, because eventually, whether you realize it or not, they're going to be your mentors.
Yeah.
There's a term that we've thrown around a good bit. It's the energy vampires. The people that literally, they don't contribute anything to the conversation, to the day. They literally just exist to suck the energy out of the room and make you feel worse. And fortunately, we have far too many of those that we just allow to go on their merry way in EMS.
Yep. It's almost like management is too, it's not that they're too scared to stand up to these suckers, but I'm coming from a place where I've left a shift because of an entire group of people that just sucked the life out of me and made my job absolutely miserable. I went directly to the boss, said every single thing that had been happening was name dropping left and right. And nothing happened to that group. And I have seen the repercussions from it. I'm glad that I got out of the situation, but what does that mean for the person that replaced me? And the people that are going to continue to go on to that shift because the turnover rate is so high. All of the students that get placed on that shift, and they're around this constant energy. And I'm like, when are we going to see there's a problem?
EMT Life asked the question, what's the fix, guys? And
I saw that, and I was like, you know what? We have to address this. We have to address this.
Public.
I think the best way to sum up, Jimmy, what you and I talked about is everybody needs to be shifting their mentality from this is what's wrong to this is what I can do about it.
Yeah.
And if everybody starts doing that, not just at work, but at home, do this in your own life, because I guarantee if you're miserable at work, you're probably miserable at home.
Correct.
So figure out your shit at home and then translate that to what are the ways that I can creatively contribute to make this better. Start engaging with people. Do some reading. Become literate on these topics and engage with people about it. That's where it starts. We can't not start there.
Some of the most insufferable people in EMS, outside of EMS, they're the most pleasant people. But they are the people that can't see that difference. Like, we have somebody at work where outside, he's wonderful. He's phenomenal. Great guy. But at work, he is the biggest little vampire I have ever met. He just sucks the life out of every single person. It's like, he can't see that, though. I'm like, if you are that miserable at work, leave.
Yeah. Yeah, leave. That would be great if all the people who hated their lives left.
For everyone who wants to join the live, the people who are live right now are all people that I know personally, and can vouch for their integrity and the people who I want to currently have a discussion with, please don't take it personally that you have also not been invited to join the live. What could a coalition of people like ourselves who have a sphere of influence, is there something that we could do that makes a difference? If you even went out and recruited more people, I mean, all of us know a few more influencers, right? What if we had 10 influencers that between everyone could reach us, we'll say 500,000 people. I mean, Ashlynn's practically there, you know, but if we had, you know, a larger coalition of influencers, is there something that coalition could do that makes an impact?
Really big words. I like this question that EMT Life. I am a newer medic. I've only been doing this 5 years. 20 years down the line, and it kind of goes with what you guys were talking about before I joined, is like, what's going to happen in the future? Well, we're already the ugly stepchild of healthcare. What is it going to be later down the line? Are people still going to look at us like people that have the untucked shirts, the unzipped boots, no belts, and have dip hanging out of our lips? Like, are we still going to be seen like that in the future? Because when people think about EMS, that's the image. When is it going to be a day when we are looked at as the Google image of EMS, where it's the nice shirts tucked in, boots are zipped, we look professional? I want to hope that day will come, but what you're asking, how are we going to get there? What can we do? I think what we are doing, talking about it, raising more hell about it. One of the most influential things that I enjoy doing is not sugarcoating EMS. Yeah, this job does suck. We see a lot of sucky things, but it's what you take from those sucky things. And one of the things I tell students is when you go on these calls and you see a lot of things, don't push it away. Stay with it, stick with it, talk about it. One of the things that you guys were talking about when I first joined was basically the, what's the word? Like what you do to wind down, like the nicotine.
Decompress?
Yes. I think in the dark humor, I was sitting here like shaking my thumb. I was like, yes, because it's not like taking that stuff away. If you catch yourself saying all this dark humor and you're making these jokes, you're making these comments and stuff, you don't realize what it's doing for the people not only around you, but the future people, the patients and the coworkers. Like, if you have a student sitting there and they're listening to all this dark humor and they're sitting there like, is he really just saying that? He's going to start repeating that. And he's going to start thinking of his own dark humor. Like, you're creating a future where he's going to now have a little bit of unhealthy coping mechanism.
Yeah, dark humor is not everything. Dark humor is...
When you mentioned the Sleepy Medic, I still have it up on my page. I refuse to delete it because what you said is exactly what I was saying. I don't believe Sleepy is a bad guy, but what he did was bad. And sometimes what you say, people will take that as a perception of your personality and your demeanor. And there are so many people that I have at my service where it is every other word is dark humor. Every other word is a joke or it's a just derogatory thing towards a patient. And I take that as a reflection of their character. And most of the time, it's correct. I would never want a student having that reflection on me. I would never want to reflect that to them. Like, I want them to grow up to be the best provider they can be. One of the ways I can do that is showing them the type of provider they can be, and that is fixing my own character. That's fixing that of my mouth. And that starts at ground zero.
Great.
So somebody else was saying only in small doses. So here's the thing, and I'm speaking for myself. I learned about 8 or 9 years ago that you don't have to double space after a period. That is only really a thing when you had old typewriters that had spacing issues. Nowadays, when we type with screens, your computer, whatever program you're using, corrects the spacing. So you only have to hit a single space. When I learned that, I was like, well, that would be hard to adjust to, right? I probably will just do that. But for 2 days, I decided, let's just single space. And now, 8 years later, it would be weird for me to double space because I don't double space anymore. I just trained myself through it. When it comes to dark humor, you only want your dark humor because you already have it. And you won't miss it when it's gone. I promise you, you won't miss it when it's gone, but you will make your environment an infinitely better place. I can remember about 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm not someone who engages in dark humor. This was just a bad moment for me. But I was talking to a nurse who just really, I was giving him a report, but he was just like not there. And I was like, what's up, man? He goes, we lost a pediatric patient today. And I just went, so they're always in the last place you love. And I was almost not welcome in that ER ever again after that. And I never ever intended to let that out. You know, it was just reflexive. And the amount of damage you do with dark humor when you think it's benign or when you're not intending to do damage, you actually can't calculate the damage that you do with dark humor. And I guarantee you that we wouldn't miss it if it's gone.
No, not. I mean, truly, it's a temporary thing. Like, you know, you have a bad call, you make a few comments or jokes about something, and it's only positive for that moment. It's not long term whatsoever. You're still going to be thinking and replaying the call over and over and over again in your head. That joke is literally going to help for a few minutes. And then all of those thoughts are going to come right back to your head. So if
dark humor is the barfly that you slept with when you were looking at her through drunk glasses.
It literally is.
Yeah, you are filled with immediate regret.
Yep.
Well, I have to,
I don't know
unfortunately,
if that's appropriate to say or not.
I got stuff going on for the rest of the day. But to answer your question before, Jimmy, just as a parting thought, you asked what would happen if we all got together, some coalition of influencers like us. I think that, in a way, because each of us has a niche, each of us has a piece of this puzzle that we do well at. I think that all of us having the unified perspective of encouraging action and real change at a ground level, it should be our driving goal, our driving vision, if you will. But then I think in our own way, we should be influencing and deep diving on the things that matter to us so that people can sample from us. We're not parroting anything. We're not duplicating our efforts in a way. We can all come from different angles. And I think that's where we can see the change, the consistency of effort, but with the variety of input on how to do different things differently. I think it's phenomenal, and I think we should keep doing that for sure.
It really doesn't take monumental things by any means. It
No.
takes just being a human. When people realize, like, it's human taking care of humans instead of just these. I think Nurse Wendy says it best whenever she meets someone and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're so amazing," and stuff like that. She's like, "No, I'm a human. I'm the same licensure. I am the same as you." And whenever we give advice, they look at us like, "Oh my gosh, this is monumental." It's really not. It's basic advice. It's life advice to not only apply to our jobs, but to our lives.
Yeah,
It's been a
absolutely.
pleasure. Jimmy, thank you very much for hosting. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah,
Really.
man.
Good to see y'all. We'll do it
Hi.
again sometime.
Thanks, brother.
All right. Y'all be good. See ya.
See ya. The thing about dark humor too is that the toxic humor is always standing behind it.
Yeah.
there's good people who engage in dark humor, and they're just not really considering the impact of it. But its evil twin is always tethered somewhere where someone is using it for evil. And so I think that when you just start saying, you know what, this just as a whole, this just isn't okay. And right now we don't need it. We don't need it anyway, but right now we especially don't need it. And I think when you just condition yourself to not use it, I think that, again, just saying what I said before, you won't miss it, and EMS won't miss it.
No, not at all. And not on the same subject, but it's another subject I wanted to bring up before I have to go as well, was you said something about like wearing things as a badge of honor. And I think that like it's the inflated egos and stuff. Like, oh my gosh, I worked this call, or I did this. And it's like, okay, cool. It's a game of roulette. Anyone could have picked up the call. Anyone could have worked it in any way, shape, or form. I think something that is so toxic, especially in my area, is we'll see these calls come out. We'll hear these calls come out. And it's kind of like the people that run marathons. You'll know they run marathons because they tell you they run marathons. The people that run the crappy calls, they're going to tell you they ran the crappy calls. I ran a call not too long ago, and it screwed with me mentally for a little bit. My partner and I didn't say a word about it. We talked about it together. We didn't talk about it any other way. We didn't talk about it to our coworkers. We followed up with the patient. And I think there's a sense of humble that is almost non-existent in EMS whatsoever. The people that work the actual bad calls, the ones that make the news headlines, the ones that just blow up a lot in a service. It travels like wildfire. There's a difference between the provider that doesn't own up to the call versus the provider that will tell every single person with that service, I ran this call. It's not about you're doing your job. That's nothing special. You know?
There's nothing worse than somebody coming up to me and saying, hey, can I tell you about a call I had? And I'm expecting for them to commiserate over something that impacted them. But instead, it's a war story. And then I'm just like, oh, no.
Oh, no.
Can you guys imagine how that would work if somebody in a different profession was to say stuff like that in the same context? Like, if the garbage man, for example, rounds the corner and is like, oh my God, I had the biggest bunch of trash. Like, that's exactly what it sounds like, though. Because,
sure
like,
that happens in sanitation.
I mean, I would hope not, but I could see that, yes. To your point, Ashlynn, so you and I actually work right up the road from one another.
Oh, I know. I've seen you before.
Yeah, we're not far from each other at all. And I've actually worked with people at my service that used to work at your service.
I'm sorry.
And they still have that mentality. Like, they still have the, oh, I'm better than everybody mentality. And, like, I run all the bad calls and I do all of this and that. And they're still toxic. I just want you to know that. So thank you for letting them go and having them come to my service because it drives me insane.
Well, it's just because you see these amazing providers. And this is another thing I wanted to bring up when you talk about the young ones. You see these awesome providers that are coming through. They're working. And then they get ruined by these people with the big egos. And they leave. It's like, no. We need you to stay. We need the other ones to leave.
I have reached the end of my time.
Okay. I have 10 minutes, actually, so this is perfect.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys jumping on, and I think that we should do this again. But I think this was a productive time. I appreciate it.
I loved it. I never get on lives, so...
I didn't realize that you were there for so long, too. And then I suddenly was like, I could have sworn I just saw somebody say Ashlynn. I started scrolling. I was like, oh, man, has she been here the whole time? So that's great. And thank you for everyone who stuck here through the whole live. All of you who, Nightmare Medic and EMT Life, Al T Unicorn, I recognize that you were here through the entire live, and I appreciate it. Anyone who followed during the live, I appreciate it. And if you guys are on shift today, go out and do good work.
Go outside. It's nice out. We'll leave you in.
See you, everyone.
Bye.
See you guys.